we've recessed, and now we're back in session. And for the convenience of the public who are here for the Shedden item, which is item number 8, Council, I'd like to move number 8 up to our next consideration, and then we'll pick up the normal flow of the agenda. And why don't we do that now? This is a recommendation report for Shedden Avenue, and Ms. Planning Director, do you, oh, I see. We've got Paul Demchak who's going to present. Very well. Could you summarize for the public the report that was provided to Council on the matter?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Burton and members of Council. Just wait for the slideshow to come up here quickly. So tonight we are presenting a recommendation report for Council's consideration. Just to start off with, the town is in receipt of an application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaws for the lands located at 331 Shedden Avenue. As you can see from the air photo, the property is located at the northwest corner of Shedden Avenue and Allen Street. I'll show a few pictures just showing what's existing on the site. This is the existing three-story medical building. This is the view from Shedden Avenue. This is the view from Shedden Avenue and Allen Street. And then this is the view directly from Allen Street. The original application, which we had a public meeting here on September 26, 2011, showed a one-block building with three stories, which included 20 units, 45 parking spaces. The density of the site was 53 units per site hectare, and the lot coverage was 62%. This is the elevation showing the original application. You can see the two elevations on this. Please take note specifically of the Shedden Avenue elevation. After the 26th meeting of September, staff began working with the Residents Association as well as the applicant, and we held a few public meetings, working group meetings with them. So on November 1st, 2011, some of the issues that were raised from these discussions included on-site and visitor parking supply not being adequate, the built form and massing of this building, the coverage being too high, the density of the site, as well as a potential precedent and prematurity, and this obviously dealing with the OTMH land status. A revised application was submitted, and we met with the residents as well as the applicant on December 6th. This application was revised to show two separate buildings. So basically it was a vertical break that was introduced, as you can see from this revised elevation. So it was two buildings of 3 stories. There was a reduction to 19 units, so 1 unit reduction. An additional 6 parking spaces of underground were added. The density was 50 units per site hectare, going down from 53, and the lot coverage was reduced to 58.4%. An additional second public information meeting was held to inform the broader neighborhood, and that was held on February 29th, 2012. And staff also met the residents on April 3rd. Just going back one more, on March 1st, 2012, staff initiated a second the hospital lands visioning workshop, which outlined the intent of the lands, which is to be redeveloped for residential purposes of low and medium density housing forms. So this could include detached, semi-detached, townhouses, and low-rise apartments at an overall density of 29 units per site hectare. Just a quick background, and this obviously my report deals with all these matters, but the existing official plan, this application was evaluated on the merits of the 2006 official plan, which designated the lands of low-density residential, a range of 6 to 17 units per site hectare. In terms of livable Oakville, there is a site-specific appeal to the land use designation of the property. Staff have evaluated based on the criteria of redevelopment potential within the plan policies. In terms of the zoning, it is an R08 zoning with special provision 115, which solely permitted the medical office building. In our evaluation of the application, I've presented this map within the report. This map gives you a neighborhood context, and we evaluate it based on density, built form, coverage, and height, and how that is a compatible land use within the neighborhood. So I'll take you through each block. As you can see, the block being 331 Shen is located very close to the middle of the map, just north of Wallace Park there. To the west of the 331 Shedden is block number 2 being the high-rise residential apartment building. Further to the west is block 4, which is a range of uses in terms of single detached as well as converted dwellings and low-rise apartments. And then to the north of it being the existing Wyndham long-term care facility, as well as the hospital lands, and further to the east and south being predominantly single detached dwellings. So as you can see here, there's a variety of types of development and a variety of densities and built forms that I'll kind of walk you through quickly in the next following slides. The first slide here shows pictures to the north of the site being the Wyndham long-term care facility. The picture on the left is the existing hospital further in the background, as well as the public school. And to the south of the property, which is the picture on the right, is Wallace Park. This is a few street views of Reynolds. You see a mixture of uses being, to the picture to the left, a single detached dwelling, and adjacent to two single detached dwellings, and adjacent to that is a low-rise apartment building. This is the Shedden Avenue streetscape. You can see here it's the high-rise residential building. This is actually 45 units, which is directly adjacent to 331 Shedden. And this is the Allen Street streetscape, which is a mixture, well, predominantly, single detached dwellings, a mixture of between 1.5 to 2-story dwellings. I want to bring you back to this map here, and this is a key map just to, again, in determining the built form coverage and height. As outlined in the report, in staff's opinion, the density is compatible with the blocks to the west, being the high-rise apartment building, as well as further to the west being the mix of uses. The density is compatible with the blocks to the west, and there's a good transition to the low density to the east, going from 45 units to the 19 units to the single detached dwellings to the east. The built form is sympathetic to the surrounding development, and the Allen Street elevation integrates with the low-density detached dwellings. Coverage is higher than other blocks. However, the site functions by utilizing underground parking. The height is appropriate, as it is consistent with the existing medical building and provides a good transition from the 7-story apartment building and the 1.5 to 2-story single detached dwellings. In terms of precedent and prematurity, staff do not feel that this is an issue, as the OTMH will be redeveloped at a maximum of 29 units per site hectare as outlined in the visioning workshop, and the proposed built form would be permitted and a compatible use within the OTMH lands. Staff also consider this application a unique application in the neighborhood in terms of precedent, and do not see it in further impacting the neighborhood to the east or the west, actually, for that matter. In conclusion, the proposed land use as a 19-unit 3-story apartment building with underground parking is considered to be an appropriate development for the subject property in terms of land use, height, and built form in the context of the existing and evolving neighborhood character. The proposed applications conform to the applicable town official plan policies, including the policies of Livable Oakville Plan, and represent good planning. Staff are recommending approval of subject application, subject to the comments and recommendations included within the report, as I've shown in this final slide. That is the conclusion of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Do you have questions, Councillor Bird?
Just a couple of questions. One, the picture of the 7-story high-rise, in its context by itself, do you believe that is compatible with the surrounding area?
That existing building, as I say that, it is existing. We've evaluated the 331 Shannon on its merits being how it transitions, how it fits within the neighborhood. I don't think they haven't applied for a 7-story building, so we did evaluate it based on that. It's difficult to comment whether or not. Yeah.
Okay, that's there, so therefore things that we have to take that in consideration. What I'm trying to, so if the application was for the 7-story building, this one we see here, would you feel that that is compatible with the surrounding area?
In terms of height, no.
Okay. Then also the other question is they were going through this South Central public land study. You've determined presumably that this is going to be the density on that study on that we're going residential, medium density on that site. Is that what we predetermined? Because that came up as compatible with the OTMH lands. I don't think the community is there yet. They were looking at alternate uses than just residential, but you've assumed that this will be compatible. And I understand where you're coming from. You'd say this is there, this is likely to happen here, therefore why not this? Am I correct? Like we haven't determined as residential on the OTMH, have we?
Through Dana, sorry.
Sorry, through your worship to Councillor Bird, this council has approved the planning policies for the OTMH lands, which do provide for medium density forms of housing up to 29 units in low-rise and townhouse forms. So those are all approved policies for those lands. And the comment in the report is that this particular development could be placed within those lands and be part of what would be approved under Livable Oakville.
We haven't, that's a whole range of, we have a pretty wide range of uses there, and that's possible, and the town owns the land. It's also possible, wouldn't it be, that we could rezone it to something else and maybe higher density or lower density, or it was deemed in the official plan, I understood, as a special study area. You're saying it's a special study area with this sort of floor of use, which is medium density?
The policies in Livable Oakville that apply to the OTMH site are approved policies and allow for low density and medium density up to 29. And the point being, this particular form and density could be located anywhere within that site in accordance with those approved policies.
Well, I appreciate that, because we're hearing tonight on the previous issue, I think a lot of people have a different understanding of what Livable Oakville is supposed to mean. And to people use the term tonight on the previous application as they believe that Livable Oakville to them meant R01 zoning or something that was compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. And in fact, what we're finding today, Livable Oakville here, as zoning that, quite frankly, for the most part, of the other blocks, and we could probably put it back up, isn't compatible. So we'll hear from the residents as to what they believe of how well they're embracing Livable Oakville when they really find it what it means or could mean in their neighborhood.
Thank you, Councillor. Other questions? I wonder, if, before we go to public delegations, I have a question which I'd like to pose. Could the planning director or the planning commissioner explain under which OP this application is being considered? I asked this question inspired by Councillor Bird's questions, because he was asking about how it fits with Livable Oakville, but I thought
Yeah,
I heard...
it's on page 113, at the bottom there.
Work with me here a minute, I'm going somewhere with this. But I heard in the presentation and I read in the report that this is actually being evaluated under the old official plan, and maybe the public would be assisted if that was clarified, so that everybody understood the basis on which this goes forward. So, Ms. Anderson.
So the lands at 331 Shedden were the subject to a site-specific appeal to Livable Oakville, specifically the designation. All other policies of Livable Oakville would apply in the valuation of an application, which has to be made under the old plan. It's very complicated, but at the end of the day, you have a designation under the old plan that they have applied to change, and they have also appealed their designation under Livable Oakville. The policies in the old plan for this particular property would, I'm cutting in and out, policies with respect to this plan would be covered under OPA 275. OPA 275 would deem the application premature pending the completion of the policies in Livable Oakville. And for that reason, when this appeal was made, it was made on the basis of a site-specific appeal to the designation, such that all of the other policies of Livable Oakville could be considered with an application. So the applicant was asked to make their appeal site-specific. The Livable Oakville hearing took place. The policies were approved, and they have made an application under the old plan as it relates to their low density, and an appeal to Livable Oakville as it applies to medium density. But the policies within which we're evaluating are predominantly under the Livable Oakville plan in terms of intensification and defining the character of the area. The policies under the old plan that are applied are the actual low-density designation on the site. It's very specific and unique given the circumstances. You will note in the recommendation that staff, in recommending approval of their OPA under the old plan, are also recommending a modification to Livable Oakville for medium density, but tying it down to the number of units and the height that has been applied for in the application.
Okay, I hope that's helpful to everybody. Madam Clerk, do we have registered delegations on this?
Yes, we do.
Could you call the first one, please?
Mr. Ian McLaren is here from the Hicks Partnership.
Mr. McLaren. Welcome. You're going to take turns?
Well, we're going to do it as a tag team. So
It's a duet?
Yeah, just to keep things moving along this evening. Lock that up. Mayor, members of council, my name is Craig Hunter. I'm the planning consultant and principal with Armstrong Hunter and Associates, and we are representing the owner. And we're here today with Ian McLaren on behalf of Bill Hicks, who's out of town. We've been working through this process for the better part of 2 years, although the applications were formally submitted about a year ago. We've reviewed the staff report. We are in full support of it. We think it's very thoroughly considered. We believe that they've documented many reasons why and carefully considered why they support the proposal, and we appreciate their hard work and efforts in this regard. We also respect the involvement and efforts of Councillors Bird and Giddings in terms of the past 6 months. It's been a complicated issue. We've had at least 6 sessions, which I'll call either 3 public consultation sessions and then 3 separate working sessions with residents and the councillors and the staff. It's a pretty intensive effort, and we thank them for those efforts. We did move the yardsticks along a little bit with respect to parking and some changes to the built form. I understand from some of the residents who are here today that we still haven't moved enough along in their minds to get their support. However, we're respectfully requesting this council's support of the staff recommendations in their fullity. Very briefly, I'm not going to repeat much of Paul's presentation. I think it was fairly thorough, and I think you've all considered the report. We believe it's a highly articulated and sensitive design that's fitting for this site. It's an apartment building that's low-rise in form, that has just 19 units, 15 of which are in the first 2 floors, 4 only on the upper floor, which is well set back from the development of a height that's comparable to the existing medical building. The second part on the left side is really filling in a parking lot. This is not a pristine residential lot. We believe in it operatively. Staff have used the word compatible many times throughout its report, and we think that's an appropriate choice of words. We believe this is a very compatible development. Livable Oakville speaks to that and defines it. It means it's not the same as, not similar to, but certainly it's 2 things that can get along and coexist without adverse planning impacts. To highlight, we think there's been careful attention paid to the height, massing, and scale of the architecture. We think it fits the varied nature and scale of this neighborhood, which is not just low density. That's one side of the equation. It also has other features, as staff have described. There's a transition in height and form. There's no adverse impacts that have been identified by either staff or a professional team in terms of grading, access, privacy, overlook, shadowing, all the typical things that one might consider that we heard at the earlier meetings. We've got more than enough parking. We've added parking to this proposal and above the zoning requirements, and nothing has been identified from a traffic or servicing perspective that would suggest that it's not appropriate to move forward with this application. Finally, we think we've gone through, over the last couple of years, a fairly comprehensive and consultative process that's been quite respectful. I mean, we haven't come to a full agreement on everything, but we've moved everything along. We've had a lot of pre-consultation. Number one, we've actively participated in the town's Oakville Trafalgar Memorial Hospital lands through all of its iterations to date. 3 public meetings, as I mentioned before, 3 additional working sessions. And I think we listened, and we've considered the comments, and we've made changes where we felt they were appropriate, and we haven't been able to make other changes that have been asked of us. But we've listened, and I think that's important. And finally, we've been able to work at the last matter that Ms. Anderson was explaining. On the basis of a site-specific appeal of Livable Oakville, we worked with staff during that appeal to scope it down to just the site, to just the land use designation, so that the entirety of Livable Oakville could move forward otherwise. And should council approve this evening, we would hope that that's an opportunity to cooperatively conclude an exercise on this basis of this site, specifically to this location. And we thank you for your time and our comments, and we'd urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you for your information. Questions? Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
information. Madam Clerk, next delegation. If you have.
I have Ms. Gail Cosman.
Good evening. Sorry, I jumped ahead of you, didn't I?
Welcome. We look forward to your information. And you can safely stand 6 to 8 inches back from the microphone and still be heard perfectly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, town councilors. Thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. My name is Gail Cosman. I'm here with my husband, David Feldstein. We live across the road at 361 Shedden. I've also been in consultation with my immediate neighbors. So to the north, Chris and Rebecca, and to the south, Irene, and then Croft and Suzanne Michelson. And those are the 4 houses that are listed in the development as being closest to the property. So we've talked to those neighbors, and they can't be here this evening. So I'm going to read from this if I can, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about a couple of the questions that were brought up as well, if I could. First, let me say thank you to Dana, to Paul, and to the rest of the planning staff at the Town of Oakville for their time, patience, and explanations over the last 9 months. We appreciate the opportunities you've afforded myself, my husband, and our neighbors to understand your rationale and also express our concerns. The Planning Department's recommendation to the Town of Oakville is to accept the latest proposal from the developer for 19 units and approximately 58.5% coverage on the 331 Shedden Avenue development. Our concern continues to be both density and mass of this development. This is somewhere between 175% and 275% of the top end of low density. And I say that range because it depends on whether or not you compare it to the Livable Oakville or the 2006 official plan. Additionally, 58.5% coverage compares to somewhere between 25 and 35% coverage of the low-density single houses that are the vast majority of the surrounding community. This proposed development is similar to what has and is being developed in downtown Oakville. In fact, the plans that you see here are an almost exact duplicate of what's on a development on Church Street in downtown Oakville, which was actually done by this exact same architect. It appears we're allowing residential Oakville to become downtown Oakville, and that is one of our key concerns. Planning staff's main argument in their meeting on April 25th, 2012, with myself and TCRA, was about transition, and they talked about it again this evening. Namely, there is a 6.5-story building directly to the west of this building. This building was built in the 70s, almost 40 years ago. There's also a mixture of single-family and 4 multi-unit buildings to the west running along Reynolds. Those non-single-family households were built in the 80s and 90s. And then along Allen, it's single-family, low-density homes. And really this argument of transition is the biggest concern that we have among my neighborhood, because this is all about precedence. We're using one building from the 1970s and 4 multifamily units from the 1990s to determine what is appropriate for this development, rather than use either of the 2 most recent plan studies, both of which were done in the last decade, and both of which call for low density. The entire area, bordered from Trafalgar to Chartwell, from Sumner to Cornwall, is zoned low density in both the recent Livable Oakville Plan and the 2006 Oakville Plan. Now, I'll grant you that there are individual pockets of 6.5-story building at that corner or multi-unit buildings. And I hope you will forgive me for using this, but those are examples of mistakes. They're not what that area was intended for. And yet here we are using those mistakes to justify something that is outside of the low-density plan, what is outside of the last 2 plans that council has approved, what is outside of the decisions you made in the last 10 years, rather than decisions that were made 20 and 40 years ago. That's what our concern is. And if we want to maintain the overall character of Old Oakville, we need to stop developments that are larger than the low-density guidelines. Instead, we are allowing past developments to allow exceptions to the plan, which then set precedents for future developments to be given exceptions. What's going to happen when those other buildings are changed? What's going to happen when somebody else in some neighborhood around here decides they want to put 60% on their land? What's going to happen when somebody wants to change their family home to a 2 or 3 or 4 development home? That's not what this area is intended for. The Town Council has the opportunity to reject this recommendation to enforce the principles encased in the Livable Oakville Plan and the 2006 Official Plan. We invest significant tax dollars. We invest significant time from both the town staff, ourselves, and from the residents. When we build these plans, we need to enforce them, not work outside them. The town, at least in its initial work on the hospital lands, is keeping within the low-density guidelines of the Livable Oakville Plan. These need to be applied to all developers as well. When we don't hold developers to these plans, the residents become frustrated, the town loses credibility. The proposed 19-unit development on the 331 Shedden Avenue property doubles the size of the existing building. I want you to think for that for a minute. So we've got a building in place right now that is about half the length of the property. They're going to replace that property almost exactly, and then they're going to put another property almost exactly the same size where currently there's parking. That's downtown Oakville density. That's not residential Oakville density. Okay? We're letting downtown move into our residential single-family homes. If the developer only replaced the existing building, he would be within or close to low-density guidelines. It would be less disruptive to the essential character of the community and what the neighborhood has essentially been used to. We're asking Town Council today to enforce the low-density zoning requirements that are in both the Livable Oakville Plan and the 2006 Official Plan. We're asking Town Council to limit the developer to only rebuilding the existing building and not building an additional building. We're asking Town Council to protect our neighborhood, keep it a residential community with space and character, and not allow downtown Oakville to migrate into Old Oakville. Sincerely, myself and my husband. So that's what I initially wrote. Now, I'd like to add a couple of comments to what questions and comments were made earlier. So earlier, I think Keith Bird talked about how does this compare, or in conversation of Keith's questions, we talked about how this compares to OTMH lands, and I think, Dana, you made a comment that this was consistent to OTMH lands. And if you think of this as a single building, yes, as a single building within all of OTMH lands, which allows low density in total, but individual buildings to be of medium density, yes, it applies. But that also says that any given property is supposed to stay within low density. And so that property, as it exists, is not low density and therefore does not comply with what you're doing in OTMH and does not comply with either Livable Oakville or 2006 plan. The other point I want to make, Mr. Mayor, is the question you asked, which is a question that I've struggled with in terms of understanding exactly how this is being approved. And I want to make the point that the zoning amendment is against the Livable Oakville plan, which is the existing plan, which they also have a request in front of the OMB. So that refers you back to the 2006 official plan. Well, on that particular property, under Livable Oakville plan, they're allowed 11 units. On the 2006 official plan, they're allowed 7 units. So I don't understand why going back to the plan that was before this is a reason or a justification for actually giving them what's essentially 3 times what's in that plan. The other comment I want to make is that when this was first put in front of the neighborhood back about 9 months ago, it was a 20-unit building with a footprint of X. They've made one adjustment. It's gone from 20 units to 19 units, and that footprint is exactly the same. The only thing that's changed the lot coverage is they've taken the archway apart away from it, which was with the drive-through that you get to the back where the underground parking is. So they have not made much modification. When they originally came in with 20 units, that was over the boundary and too high. By putting it at 19, they are at the utmost limit of medium. So I want to leave that thought with you as well. Thank you very much for your time. I think I've well used my 10 minutes, and I appreciate it.
Well, you even had a little bit left, but thank you very much for your information.
Thank you.
Next delegation, please.
Next delegation is Mary Ann Hawthorne.
Ms. Hawthorne, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening, Mayor Burton, members of council. I want to emphasize that I'm speaking for myself. I am a member of TCRA. In fact, I'm a founding member of Trafalgar Charter Residents Association in 1987. I've been away. I have followed the process on this project. I wasn't at the TCRA meeting on Wednesday night, excuse me. I've seen various buildings on this site. There was a round building on this site in the 60s. It was architecturally incompatible with anything that was here. And this new building was built in, I think it was the late 70s. It's a huge parking lot. There's hundreds of cars that go to this site every day. It's not an attractive building, and the parking lot, of course, is just simply pavement. The Rockcliffe building that's on the corner of Reynolds, when it was built, it was discussed. I'm sure that Keith probably remembers the controversy over the building, but you have to remember that when that building was built, Wyndham wasn't there. Oakville Trafalgar High School was just that small part of the high school with the height, and there was absolutely nothing in Wallace Park except for a set of swings in the corner. There wasn't the tennis courts, there was absolutely nothing there. So what was needed in our area was apartment buildings. We needed to have people living in apartments. People couldn't afford to buy houses downtown, so that's why that apartment building was there. So there was a variety of housing introduced besides the apartment buildings on Wall Street, which had been there previously. What's happening now is I have 3 sons, 2 who are 36, 1 who's 35, twins and a single. They're married, and 2 live in Oakville. And my children, they're professionals, they're married to professional women. They don't want a single-family dwelling home with a great big yard to cut and look after, cut grass and look after, like their parents. We had huge properties. We lived in Lynbrook Road with 1.5 acres. We still have a huge property on Reynolds Street where we've always cut the grass and we've had a big yard and so forth. My children don't want that. My generation wanted that. And a lot of my generation still support having that. But the young people don't want that. They belong to golf clubs. They go on holidays. They want to live downtown. My children would like to live downtown, but they can't, A, afford to live downtown because of the yards with the houses and so forth. It's possible that some of these various means of living downtown are affordable. And I think that it's very important that we introduce into our urban core, and it is our urban core on Shedden, another type of housing than the single-family dwelling. We have enough of those, and I really feel that we need to bring other types of housing into our core, A, to increase our density. And the reason I would like to see a density increase, and that's very strange for me to say that, because I'll tell you, I did not want density increases a long time ago, but I realize that if we don't have a density increase, we will have no representation at this council anymore. We are going to lose representation already because of our low density. We need to increase our density so that our stores downtown stay viable, our Whole Foods complex as well, so that there are people who can patronize these stores and also live downtown. So I feel, and I realize that I don't live across the street from this particular construction. I live on Reynolds Street across from the park, so I can say very readily that I support this, and I think it's a architecturally good building. It takes away the great big blacktop. It's a permanent building. It hasn't been a permanent building. It's a permanent building, and I really feel that in this area, I want to point out to council that we've lost our high school, we've lost our hospital, we've lost 3 elementary schools, we have just recently lost our post office, we've just recently lost our Tim Hortons. The infrastructure in our area is entirely being gutted. We're losing just about everything. What we need is we do need an increase in density so that we have representation here at council. And I feel badly because I know that I'm opposing what you're saying because you live across the street from this. But honestly, to really look at it honestly, it is a much improved building over the construction of what's there now. You're going to get 20 units with possibly 2 cars instead of 250, 300 cars a day going to that site. It's just a constant in and out there. In fact, it's a big mess because the parking lot isn't big enough for the building now. So
You really should keep your
I'm sorry.
focus here.
Sorry. Okay. So I just think that it's a good plan. It meets livable Oakville from livable Oakville, what we know it now. I like the underground parking. I think that's a very positive thing. The green space across the street, the park itself, Wallace Park, accommodates the density to some degree because people can walk out of the houses into the park. I guess that's really all I have to say, but I have lived here my whole life, and I've lived in Southeast Oakville the majority of my life. I lived on Palmer Avenue, I was raised on Palmer Avenue, and we did always have a low density here, but I don't think that's supportable anymore in the future. And I feel that TCRA 2 has to adjust to the fact that we're a community in transition, a very big transition. And I believe that this is a positive way of addressing new construction on Shedden Avenue.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
information. I don't see any questions. Thank you. Madam Clerk, any other delegations?
Yes, we have Mr. Nick Hutchins.
Mr. Hutchins? Welcome. Council looks forward to your information. I gather you have several informations.
I'm actually here reading our town planner, John Canham, who was a town planner, who's part of the TCRA, so he asked me to say a few words on this. We, of course, appreciate the time the planning staff has spent with us debating this application, but we don't agree with their final recommendation to council. There's just no solid, compelling reason why for this application should be approved by council, so we are asking council to reject it. Staff report, and he gives some points here. Staff report speaks about his application of 19 units as conforming to the provincial policy statement and growth plan of the Greater Golden Horseshoe, as well as the regional official plan. So would a much smaller development. There's no concrete rationale for 19 units. The way the report is written, it could apply to a development of 25 or 15 units. Why 19? Why not 10? As the original OPA on the site recommends. In fact, it recommends it was 7. And the new livable Oakville plan, that site is zoned for about 11 units. Okay, when livable Oakville official plan was recommended to council in 2010, the planning department was aware of these provincial and regional policies, and in that light, they endorsed a low-density designation on this site. Neither the province nor the region objected to that low-density designation. They were quite content with the intensification targets were being met elsewhere in the community. Therefore, there is no need to increase the density at 331 Shedden at this time. And we would ask what has occurred in the interim for staff to have changed their minds, because it seems that they've done a complete about-face. At considerable cost and time, and after a huge public consultation process with the community, livable Oakville official plan was finally endorsed by all 3 levels of government. Why the urgency to change the low density designation again on 331? Number 4, we contend that this proposed development of 19 units on this site is not in keeping with the character of the largest stable residential neighborhood. Shedden is not Church Street, where townhouse development covers 80% of the property, and the 58.4 of lot coverage on 331 Shedden is outrageous. This is on the fringe of the residential area, not the downtown area. Even the 7-story building on the west, the Rockcliffe building, only covers 25% of that property. What precedent are you setting here, not only for the future development of the hospital lands, but also the future redevelopment of the older single-family detached homes in the immediate vicinity? If council approves this development proposal, it will be condoning an increase in density up to 3 times what is currently permitted in the 2006 official plan. Why? What is the rationale for that? Although there was a public consultation on the proposal, the public feel that we were not sufficiently heard. The public wants low density to be maintained on this site, just as council wants to maintain the 4-story height limitations in the downtown area. Again, what is the difference that has happened? Now, this is my personal part of this, as I'm not speaking now for the TCRA whilst before I was. I would like to add that this is premature in my opinion, especially since the mayor has been asking the community to think big. This development breaks the low density on the site, and as a transition is not appropriate from the Rockcliffe 6 or 7-story building. With this sort of argument, anything could be built along Reynolds or Allen. What happens when the small apartment blocks across from Rockcliffe building become available? They're going to say, well, from transition point of view, we will allow who knows what density. And then you've got more high-rise apartment blocks moving up Reynolds. this density and transition here, in my opinion, is also prematurely and bad, since it cuts any possibility of linking what will happen on the OTMH and the old OT lands with Wallace Park. Thinking out of the box, this is just, again, my visualizations potentially. If the town were to do something truly visionary, the 333 Shedden land could perhaps be swapped for something like the tennis court sites on the side, and build on the side so that you could link. This would gain the town a lot more land, because you could actually close Shedden and only leave part of the Shedden which services the Rockcliffe building. All that could become part of the public land. That would then help if there was linkages or whatever's going to be built in the OT to be able to tie in Wallace to whatever's happening in the OT or the hospital lands. Think big. I urge the council to reject the 19 units and see if some other compromise can be attained. And then if not, then not set precedents, but defend its own official livable Oakville plan at the OMB. We've spent a lot of time and efforts to getting livable Oakville. Why are we wanting to shoot ourselves in the foot, the first horse out of the gate, so to speak? Livable Oakville is going to be challenged many times, but the more you give in, the more the developers will try to challenge you. So this thing, in my opinion, is premature. The South Central Parks and Rec committees have only just started looking at what all this land was supposed to be in the special study area, including Brantford, and I think by allowing this now, we're basically cutting it, all of that study area in half and limiting what we can do. So we won't have a vision for this area. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you for your story. Are there any questions? Thank you, Nick. Are there any other delegations? Are there any other members of the public with information for council on the matter? All right. I will confine it to table. And I'll look to councilors.
Your Worship, if you're looking for a motion to approve it, I've been involved, I've come to a different conclusion, and I supported the idea of thinking big. It's unfortunate that we've coming here and the staff are responding to basically nothing has changed from the original report going forward. And so this is their response to, I guess, a very, very intransigent position taken by the developer in their interpretation of what the neighborhood wants. And suggestions that maybe this isn't the proper site, it should be dealt with in context of the rest of the properties, were summarily rejected. And so therefore, this is what we have, and planning staff are basically embracing the position of the developer. Not much has changed from the original issues report as issued by the applicant 2 or 3 years ago. So I'm in an awkward position. I will not support it. I believe we can do better than this when we look at it in context with the surrounding areas. You just have to look at the location of it to know we'll work around this property rather than have it in context with the surrounding neighborhood. So I'm not going to compound the current Shedden apartment building by somehow figuring we can build this and it'll be a transition. I just don't think you can put enough lipstick on this to make it compatible, so I won't vote it.
Thank you, Councilor Bird. I have a couple of questions. Councilor Giddings, could you just give me 1 second? I have a couple of questions for legal staff that I would like to hear the answers to in camera, because it's solicitor-client privilege. And Councilor Giddings, would you like to ask anything before that, or would you like to wait till after? Oh, and could I have a motion to proceed past the hour? Councilor Johnston, that takes precedence. Let's deal with that. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Councilor Giddings.
I'm not able to move it either. If
You want to go on camera?
Oh, did you,
Yeah.
would you like to?
So that carried, and it's my mistake. I'm very sorry. Madam Clerk, would you rig the chamber for a meeting closed to the public for the purpose of a hearing advice from our solicitor that's subject to solicitor-client privilege concerning litigation or anticipated litigation? All right, welcome back to the public session of this meeting of the Planning and Development Council. Council has met in a session closed to the public for the purpose of receiving advice from the solicitor that's subject to solicitor-client privilege on the confidential items of tonight, C1, C2, C3, and C4, and the Shedden Ave item. And for the purposes of the record, Council has given direction, where did Nadia go? So I can read the full recommendation from the confidential items now?
Yes, you can.
So Council has given direction that staff be authorized to finalize a settlement consistent with the principles described in the report from the Legal Department dated April 25th to the satisfaction of the Town Solicitor and Director of Planning Services, that the Town Solicitor and Director of Planning Services be authorized to execute minutes of settlement and any other requisite documents to implement the settlement. And Council has given direction that that the town participate in the appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board regarding Committee of Adjustment decision, the decision for 1315 Ariel Road. And Council has given direction that the town not participate in the appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board regarding the Committee of Adjustment decision on 1065 Lakeshore Road East. And Council has given direction that the Legal Department be authorized to proceed in the appeal filed with the Ontario Municipal Board to oppose the decision of the Committee of Adjustment approving the application of a minor variance at 346 Watson Avenue. That staff be authorized to negotiate and finalize a settlement if possible to the satisfaction of the Solicitor and Director, and that the Solicitor and Director be authorized to execute minutes of settlement and any other requisite documents to implement any settlement. And that was what we did while we were away. And we are now in the middle of item 8, and the matter has been confined to table, and the chair is looking for a motion to approve the recommendation, if there is one. The chair is looking for a motion. Councillor Giddings.
Sorry, you aren't going to receive that motion from me. If I could ask Mr. Demchuk to put slide 13 back up, just want to have it. Or page 13. So we see the tennis courts in 331 Shedden between Allen and Reynolds. The OTMH lands to the north are currently being looked at and studied with a density of 29 per site hectare. We're about to look at Brantwood to the southeast through the South Central Land Study. To the south of that, we've got Wallace Park and the Curling Club. The Curling Club is up in the air, and Wallace Park may well be part of the South Central Land Study. And I appreciate the comments about the transition that is provided from west to east. My concern is the transition from north to south in terms of what's could affect landlocked to the south there. So I'm not able to support that or move it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. You took us back to where we were before we went in camera. I appreciate that. We got some grounding there. So now, is there a mover for the staff recommendation? Councillor Johnston moves it to get it on the table. Are there any speakers for it? All right, then I'll call the motion. All those in favor? All those against? It carries. All right, that brings us back to the agenda. And now, council, we have several important matters. It looks like that we may have to put some over. I would ask, I have a request from council that item 7's presentation be heard. And I would just ask before we do that, staff, if there's any other item that's more important that we might be able to do or not. Just, I need some guidance from staff on the remaining agenda.
Your Worship, I believe there aren't any other individuals on OPA 1 matter, so that could be determined without a presentation. And the other items probably could as well. I don't think there's anyone else here to speak to any of those items.
All right. And I'm taking from that you attach some importance to getting the Burlington OPA matter and so on through. Councillor Demoff, I wonder, let me poll the audience to be sure that, are there any members of the public here for item number 5, item number 6? Is there anything else, item 5 and 6? I'm not seeing.
And 7.
2. All right. So, Councillor Demoff, what's your wish? Give me your preference.
What's my wish? I want to hear the presentation on item 7. How we deal with that is up to you.
Okay. All right. So we have delegations for item 5. Anyone on item 5? All right. I wonder, Councillor Johnston? Councillor Johnston moves item 5. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. You got at least that wish. Item 6, how many delegations do we have? 2? Any? Okay. Mr. Taylor, what item are you here on?
2.
Oh. Is there any opposition to OPA 1? No. Is there a mover? Councillor Dudek? Discussion?
What are we moving? 2 and 2A?
2 and 2A.
I need a motion to receive 2.
Councillor Dudek moves receipt of 2. And Councillor Dudek moves item 2A. Any discussion? All in favor? And that carries. I think that brings us to item 7.
We haven't done 6.
Oh,
Item 6, I'll move it.
item 6. Are there any members of the public here for item 6? Is there any councillor with questions about item 6? It's moved by Councillor Johnston.
In accordance with the memo.
Yep. So the councillor has moved that the zoning bylaw amendment submitted by Bott Holdings be approved and the zoning bylaw passed as revised in accordance with the memo from the Planning Services Department dated April 30th and distributed at the meeting. Councillor Elger.
Just one question of staff is regarding Conservation Halton. Just want to make sure, I read the letter, but they are still in 100% full agreement with this application? Thank you.
Any others? All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that is carried.
Who moved that? I'm sorry.
That was Councillor Dudek. So, sorry, Councillor Johnston. Well, okay, wait a minute. Then I have to have another burst of sugar here. Ooh, warm Coke. That's the worst. All right. Item 7. We are looking forward to this presentation, and I'd like to just point out that Rukshan De Silva, our planning intern, has come back for this because this was one of his projects. And council joins me, I'm certain, in wishing you every success in your chosen profession. And we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And good evening, councilors. I'm here to recommend the repeal of 73 bylaws from 1988 to 1994 that currently exempt certain lands within the town from part lot control. I'll try to make this quick so we can all go home. I'll just start off quickly with what part lot control is, why we permit exemptions from part lot control, and the reason that we repeal those exemptions, and then just a short summary of where the affected lands are in the town, and then conclude with staff recommendation. So once a plan of subdivision has been registered, the owner may sell any whole lot within that plan, However, the owner may not sell part of a lot within that plan without further approvals, and this is known as part lot control, and it's established under Section 50 of the Planning Act. So the reason that we exempt certain lands from part lot control is to allow for the subdivision of a lot to occur to construct semi-detached and townhouse dwelling units. And Council has been approving these bylaws since 1986. Before 1995, however, there was no provision in the Planning Act to include a sunset clause within the part lot control exemption bylaws to establish an expiry date. But in 1995, the Planning Act was amended and to include this provision, and from that time forward, all part lot control bylaws that were issued automatically lapse after 1 year. And this is also the current procedure. So between 1986, which is when Council first started approving these exemptions from part lot control, and 1994, which was the year before the expiry provision was added to the Planning Act, Council approved 97 part lot control bylaws that do not have expiry dates. So technically, this means that the lands affected by these 97 bylaws could be further divided without approval from the municipality. So in order to avoid this situation, Planning Services staff consider it appropriate to repeal part lot control bylaws that do not have expiry dates. I just want to reiterate that the repeal of these bylaws is in the best interest of the municipality, as it does prevent the further subdivision of land, and it also protects Oakville's landowners, as we don't want anyone to circumvent the proper municipal planning process, or land division process, sorry. It is also important to note that this procedure is consistent with our current practice and compliant with the Planning Act. So previously, 24 of these bylaws were repealed by Council, and this leaves 73 bylaws that were passed between 1988 and 1994 that do not have expiry dates. So the location map just provides a spatial reference of the distribution of the 73 bylaws within the town. And our recommendation before Council tonight is to approve bylaw 2012-37, a bylaw that repeals 73 bylaws from 1988 to 1994, which exempts certain lands within the town from part lot control. Thanks for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and I salute the clarity and the new meaning to the word housekeeping that this gives, because boy, are we sweeping out some old stuff. Councillor Demoff?
I would be pleased to move the staff recommendation, and also I'd like to thank Rukshan for presenting to us. He was the student representative on the Santa Claus Parade Committee. So I'm very proud to see him now as an intern at the town of Oakville and moving on to the back to school at Waterloo.
Thank you, Councillor Demoff, and thank you, Rukshan, for your volunteering on the Santa Claus Committee as well. Councillor Elgar?
Yeah, it's not about the Santa Claus Committee. The question is related to what was in place before 1988?
Can you provide further clarification?
I notice you mentioned it's between 1988 and 1995. I'm wondering, what did we have in place before 1988?
So the council wasn't passing any part lot exemptions from part lot control before 1986, and once that started in 1986, the 24 bylaws that were passed between 1986 and 1988 have been previously repealed by council in the 2000s, early 2000s.
We were not approving anything like that before 1988? How were we subdividing? Without part lot control?
Can I defer this question to Dana? Ms. Anderson?
Before 1986, we didn't do it.
Right.
Was his information. And the councillor is wondering, as planning director, what control we had before that, or did we take any control before that?
My understanding is we did not have control before that.
Thanks very much.
So the modern world. Councillor Giddings.
So do we notify these property owners, is my only question?
Do you have answers to that question? So, as we do not currently notify the expiration of part lot control bylaws, we have not notified the owners of the affected properties, consistent with current practice. However, part lot control is a regulatory tool, and the repeal of these bylaws will not affect the owner's legal
legal title to their lands.
Thank you, Councillor. All right, so we've, have we passed the thing? No? But you've moved it, and I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed, if any, and that carries, and congratulations. Thank you. Now, I think we're at the point where we need a motion to rise and report. Councillor Knoll, thank you for that. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Where is my report? I rise and report that the Committee of the Whole has met and has made recommendations on consent item 1, confidential consent items C1, 2, 3, and 4, and I won't say 4. Public hearing items 2 and 2A, 3 and 4, except that items 2 and 2A were changed to discussion items. Discussion items 2 and 2A, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and confidential discussion item C4, as noted by the clerk. And if you're following that, I now need a mover and seconder for this report. Councillor Johnston, Councillor Duddick, thank you. All in favor? Opposed, if any? The report is adopted. Is there new business of an emergency, congratulatory, condolence nature? Councillor DeMoff.
I promise I'll be brief. The One Toronto team is entering the playoffs starting on Saturday, the one that has their head office here in Oakville. The owner is here in Oakville. The Toronto Rock start their playoff run, and as we all know, you can't stop the Rock. So I would like all of council to join with me in wishing them good luck as they start their run for another championship.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure we all do. We have to root for the hometown team by any stretch. So, that's right, you need tickets. See Councillor DeMoff. So now, if we could have a mover and seconder for the bylaws.
Your Worship, I'd like to speak tonight, and I've just moved them.
Thank you for moving the bylaws. I need a seconder. Councillor Grant, thank you. Councillor Robinson, do you wanted to speak? Oh, I see, I get it. I am slow. All right, here we go. This is a motion for the following bylaws. 2012-27 as revised, 2012-31, 32, and 36 and 37, 2012-38 as revised, and 2012-42, the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council. All in favor? Opposed, if any? They are adopted. That completes our agenda, and I thank you for your time and attention. It's been great working with you this evening, and we are adjourned.